What's up, webheads? I'm Steven from the Hills Maniacs, and this is my review of Spider-Man No Way Home. Before I get into the review, though, there will be spoilers in this video because I'll be talking about certain things from the movie that I really enjoyed and things like that. So if you haven't seen Spider-Man No Way Home yet, go check that out and then come back here. So one thing I did like about this movie was that it picked up like pretty much right where it left off. Like it even showed that end credit scene from Spider-Man Far From Home where like it shows Mysterio on the screen revealing to everybody that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. I do like that they included some things to show us like what Peter's life is like now that everybody knows who he is, because it's affecting not only his life but also MJ's life and Ned's life, all his friends from school, and even like Happy's life. Like anybody associated with Peter in this movie was all like brought in and interrogated, and they tried to arrest everybody that he knows and things like that and question them and everything else, like because they consider Spider-Man a fugitive. And it even showed like them getting declined, Peter, Ned, and MJ getting declined college applications because they're all associated with Peter, so like, and because Peter Parker is a fugitive, the colleges didn't want them there either, so it really showed like how tough his life is now. I feel like the movie should have leaned into that a little bit more and maybe stretched that out or showed a few more things before that, because then at that point is when it gets into him going to Doctor Strange like we saw in the trailers, where he tries to get Strange to basically make everyone forget that he is Spider-Man and things like that. Like the way they did it was fine because it still showed like that, Peter's on the run and everything. I just would have liked to have personally seen the whole movie like that. He doesn't get it fixed. Like, he just kind of has to deal with the world knowing he's Spider-Man. Maybe had to prove that he is that he is a hero and prove Mysterio wrong or fix his name and everything else. Like, that would have maybe been a better movie, but I do like what they did here. And I also like that they didn't include Doctor Strange too much. Like, the trailer, that very first trailer made it seem like they were going to include Doctor Strange in this movie too much. Like, he was going to be what Iron Man was in Spider-Man Homecoming, or what like Nick Fury kind of was in Far From Home, where there's another hero or another person associated with the Avengers that's helping him. I thought they were going to do that with Doctor Strange in this, but Strange wasn't in it as much as I thought he was going to be, because he does at one point, when they discover that these villains that have come through after Peter messes up Strange's spell, him and Peter kind of fight because Strange wants to send them back to their reality where they all die facing Spider-Man, and Peter doesn't think that's right. He thinks he can help them and change that and everything else. So him and Doctor Strange kind of fight in the mirror dimension and everything else. Like, Strange brings them there. He's trying to get his box thing back that we saw in the trailer from Peter, and Peter eventually manages to trap Doctor Strange in the mirror dimension, and then like comes back and actually kind of helps these villains. He tries to help them like not be villainous anymore, or sort of fix them. But like obviously some of them, like Green Goblin, doesn't want to be fixed. So I'd say he's kind of the main villain of this, because he convinces the other villains that like we can be whatever we want in this universe, and they all kind of like go away from, get away from Peter. Except Doc Ock, he does manage to fix. He fixes the thing on the back of his neck that allows him to control the arms again, which we didn't see. We saw at the end of Spider-Man 2, the original one, where Doc Ock sort of does that himself. He takes back over control of the arms and uses it to flood his machine in the river. So, like, really, Doc Ock in this movie was kind of the only one that was willing to sort of go back home, and, like, he was okay with what he was going to have to do. But, like, everybody else was, like, they didn't want to leave. Like, Electro steals an arc reactor that Peter had from Tony Stark and uses that to, like, fuel his powers and everything else to make him more powerful. And, like, Sandman is, like, none of them want to go back home. And that was kind of the whole premise of the movie. Like, now Peter has to kind of deal with this because he caused all this by messing up Strange's spell. Another thing I liked, too, was the interaction between the villains. Like, Doc Ock knew who Norman Osborn was, and he was surprised to see him because he thought he was dead. Because in that universe, the news would have broke that Norman Osborn was killed. He was the Green Goblin. He got killed by his glider, everything else. And Norman knew who Doc Ock was because he was an associate. He was associated with Oscorp in that universe. So it's like, and even the Lizard and Electro communicating with these, like Electro knew who Dr. Connors was, and then he gets defeated by Spider-Man. And then they kind of had this whole scene where like the villains were sort of explaining to each other what happened to, like, when like Doc Ock tells Norman what happened to him, that he got killed, and that kind of fuels why he doesn't want to go back to, why some of them don't want to go back to their reality, because they know that they're going to die. So I did like that dynamic as well, where like, the villains from those universes still know each other. It didn't break the continuity of the movies that these characters came from, which I kind of appreciated that. Like, and even if you've never seen like the Amazing Spider-Man movies or even the original Spider-Man trilogy, now this kind of makes you want to go back and watch those to see what happens to these characters when you don't see them in this movie. But for anybody that didn't see those movies, that kind of explained it in a nice way, nice quick way, a couple lines from each of the characters, like what happens to them, so that if you haven't seen the Amazing Spider-Man or the original Spider-Man trilogy, now you know what happened. So like, you're not confused who these characters are. We know what happens to them in this other universe. So that was kind of a neat thing as well, and it showed how good Marvel is at like keeping with continuity. One thing I will nitpick about, though, was the way they made Lizard look in this movie. The CGI was kind of like, it wasn't that great, honestly. They still had the same actor who played him in the Amazing Spider-Man movie, but we see him as the Lizard for most of the movie in this. I don't know, he didn't look the way he did in the Amazing Spider-Man movie. So I didn't really like that necessarily, but that's just a minor thing. I feel like they could have just gone back and like got that CGI, whatever they used in that, and used it on this, or brought that back over or whatever. But that was just a minor thing. Everybody else pretty much looked exactly how they did. They were all pulled from a moment in the movies they came from, where like right before they died, pretty much. And I like the way that they did that as well, because each of the characters sort of explained how they got in this universe and what they were doing before that. I liked how they did this as well. They showed, like, Doc Ock explained that he had Peter Parker, like, being choked with his robotic arm. And that was from the moment from Spider-Man 2, like, right before Tobey Maguire Peter Parker in that one convinced him to, go back to being a good person and to get rid of his machine and everything else. That's the moment that Doc Ock remembers, but then he got warped into the MCU. So like, that's why he was there, and how he got there and everything else. He didn't know what happened, and he got confused. And even Electro explains like what happened in Amazing Spider-Man, where he got defeated and turned into like a battery, basically, or sucked into a battery thing. And when we first see him in this movie, he's kind of just electricity. Like, he didn't even really have like a human form yet. He was kind of recreating himself, like recharging sort of, and then he wasn't blue anymore and got his regular body back when Peter first battles him in this movie. So I like that they kept the continuity and like I said earlier with the like how they explain to each other what happens to them. I like that they also continued the continuity here, like explaining what happened to them before they got brought into this universe. And that also, again, you don't have to go back and watch those movies now because you know what happened. So if you've never seen those, you don't have to worry about it. They kind of explained it. I think they did a really nice job with that as well. And they managed to make it a crossover that made sense and kept continuity with the original, like, stories that were told about those villains and those characters that were brought over into this universe. And then, of course, they did manage to cross over the Spider-Mans as well. You had Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire in this, which everybody was speculating about, and, they were doing, like, there was a lot of theories about it and everything else. I didn't really like the way that they brought them into this movie, because they were also sucked into this universe, obviously, just like the villains were. But for whatever reason, first of all, Ned was able to summon portals in this movie, with Doctor Strange's sling ring that Peter took off of him so he couldn't get out of the mirror dimension. For whatever reason, Ned got the power to do that. He opens portals in his house because he was saying, we need to see Peter, and he accidentally opened a portal, and Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker comes through, and he says that he's been looking for this Peter Parker for a while, trying to find him so that he can help him. And then they do it again, and then Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker comes out. So, I thought that was a bit anticlimactic for that. I feel like it would have been cooler if, Peter was, in one of those situations where he's being, pretty much down and out, defeated from all the villains just attacking him at once or something, and then you just see the other Spider-Men come in. Just kind of like Cap in Endgame, where it was him versus Thanos and his whole army and stuff, and then you see the portals open up in the back. I feel like that would have been more impactful, because I didn't really, it didn't really feel that exciting when they came through. It should have been more exciting, but to me, I was just that's how they bring them in. They were already in this universe, walking around somewhere in the streets of New York or whatever, trying to figure out what happened and how they got here. And then Ned just kind of brings them here, and they take him to Peter and stuff. So I didn't really like that much. But what I think the best scene from the whole movie was when the three Peter Parkers were all talking together. And you got to hear the stories from the other two Peters talking to the Tom Holland's Peter Parker, telling him, don't become a bad person out of this. Because, spoiler alert, Aunt May got killed in this movie from the Green Goblin, and Peter wants, he's really enraged, and he really wants to kill Green Goblin, even though he said he originally wanted to send them all back to their timelines. And these Peters basically explained to him, you don't want to go searching for revenge and everything else, because that'll just turn you into a bad person. They both kind of explained that. And I like that they used their stories of Uncle Ben dying and things because that happened in both of their universes. But for this Peter, it was Aunt May that dies, and she even gave the "with great power comes great responsibility" speech. So I thought that was a nice moment, and just the interaction from all three Spider-Mans throughout the movie. There's a scene when they're on the Statue of Liberty, waiting for the villains to show up, because they were I guess attracting them there, or however they brought them there, I forget. Where they're all just kind of sort of joking around, they're Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker and Tom Holland are both surprised, or they're both asking Tobey Maguire how are you able to shoot webs out of your hands naturally without it's just flowing through your body? And they were kind of amazed with that, because they both build web shooters and things like that. So it was neat to see the different how these different Spider-Men react with each other, because they're all different and unique in their own ways. So all in all, I mean, it felt like a nostalgia movie, but it wasn't too nostalgic, and it did a nice job of explaining everything in a good way, where people that haven't seen those other Spider-Man movies know what happened to those characters, and they can understand it. So they did a nice way, they worked around that nicely, and I thought that was really impressive how they managed to put that together without kind of screwing it up or making it seem like too much. It wasn't a huge Endgame level crossover where all these characters came together finally, but it was still, you got to see the original Spider-Mans, or, before Tom Holland and everything, all three renditions of Spider-Man on the big screen, as well as, all those villains from the past movies. And it was explained in a way that everybody could understand, whether it was fans of those original Spider-Man movies, or even people that are fans of the MCU that have never seen those. It all kind of meshed well into a really good movie, and it didn't really have to, I thought they were going to use it as a bouncing off point to sort of set up Doctor Strange 2, which they really didn't do. But we did get an end credits scene where it was basically just a trailer for Doctor Strange 2, where all these other things happened. But yeah, so I didn't think it was a bad movie at all, but let me know what you guys thought down in the comments section. Also, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more. Maybe in a couple weeks or so, I think I'm going to do a video where I compare every live-action Spider-Man movie, and I might include Into the Spider-Verse as well. So if you're a fan of all the Spider-Man movies, be sure to check that out as well. And also, the rest of this week, we're going to have all Christmas-related videos coming up as part of our Christmas week for this year. So check those out as well as you get ready for the holiday season. Thank you for watching this video, everyone, and I will see you in the next one.
subscribe.